Now, in a moment, I'm going to talk about the VIX above the 50, the percentage gain today. It was as high as 23. It closed at 15% higher. Before I do, a couple of things I want to point out to you here, and that is the MACD did get a bullish cross today. The MACD got a bullish cross. Histogram moved into positive territory. RSI moving above 50 right now. So if we start seeing a bigger sell-off, if we start getting the reversal sooner rather than later, then we might start going parabolic on the VIX if we start seeing a reversal immediately. And I don't want to rule that out. I still think NASDAQ's going to fill the gap. I could be completely wrong about that. Just telling you exactly what I'm thinking about filling that gap. You don't have to fill it. But I want to just bring this to your attention. We are getting that bullish MACD cross. We don't have the bearish MACD cross yet on the S&P 500 or the Dow or the NASDAQ. What we're watching is, do we drop back down below the 50 by a little bit more time, or do we start going parabolic? I've said the VIX is up over 10%, so it's predicting a rebound on the S&P 500 the next two sessions. When you start going parabolic, you throw all of that out the window. That's when it really doesn't work anymore. Why it only works about 85% of the time. 15% of the time, it doesn't work. These moves of greater than 10% on the VIX. If the VIX drops back below the period moving average, still may try to form some divergences, like the RSI, the amzn oscillator, the histogram, things like that in the daily time frame. I'll talk more about that shortly. Please support the channel with the link directly below that allows me to be able to provide you this information. The chart, you like the indicators, please let me know that by supporting the channel. Take a moment to do that. I would really appreciate it. The link below to take you to a secured site. You can donate any amount you want or make it a recurring donation. If you do that, I thank you. If you could take a moment to partner with me in supporting the channel today, I would really appreciate it. Thank you for your consideration for that. We keep hearing over and over, oh, what could possibly happen to cause the market to sell off? What could happen? And we're already seeing, just today, two issues creating volatility in the stock market. Of them escalate further, create more downside. Now, again, I still believe NASDAQ's going to go higher and fill the gap. I think they're likely forming a divergence in the daily time frame. But again, today's volatility, we were up as high as 23% on the VIX. We closed back above the 50-period moving average. We ended up higher by just over 15%, up 2.54. So we're back above the 50, the green line. The 50 is still above the 200. Again, momentum's now turning bearish. Could start a reversal. My guess is we're still going to go higher and end up forming a divergence. I think we could see a peak within the next 2 weeks, this week or next week, give or take. As I said, it's just a ballpark based on the last two tops, or based on the last two rate cuts. The Fed pivot, the start of the rate cuts at the beginning, say at the end of the bull market and the beginning of the bear markets. I'll be watching to see, does volatility start escalating? Start seeing it go parabolic and we start a reversal. We see it pull back, maybe form a divergence on the daily chart on the RSI before all is said and done, S&P on the NASDAQ, and still see the NASDAQ go fill that gap. I still think that is the likely scenario going forward. Things begin to up that is creating volatility in the market, and it could quickly get out of control. Two things. We saw the market begin to sell off as we saw the port workers strike to take effect at midnight on October 1st. And this could really cause concerns for the market about the economy with the impact on global supply chains. This could be an issue. Started to see some volatility in the market. This could have been part of that. And then later, during the session, we saw Iran attack Israel, rattling markets further, an attempted recovery, and then a late day sell-off above the lows. And they've been warning you that tensions have been heating up in the Middle East, and there's concerns that could escalate into a regional war. Iran had been attacking Israel through their proxies. Israel has been knocking out that threat, and now Iran is attacking them directly. There is going to be a response. This could rattle markets further, but it will be immediately or a delayed reaction. We don't know. But just pay attention to this issue, man, because tensions in the Middle East continue to intensify. This could rattle markets further. We have the port workers strike. We have Iran attacking Israel. Market sold off. It could have been worse. We recovered off the lows. It could have been a much bigger sell-off. Some nail biting going on, and then back stopped, and the market attempted to recover, but it sold off back down at the very end of the session. Watching, but again, people telling us, oh, what could possibly be the catalyst for the market going off? Well, here's two issues right here that have the ability to trigger sell-offs if things intensify more. When if workers' strike continues, this could really cause some concerns for the economy. If tensions in the Middle East continue to escalate again, and these are just a couple of things. Again, we know recession is coming. We're eventually going to start seeing that show up in economic data. We're going to start seeing evidence of that. So here's what happened today with the S&P 500. We gapped lower. We had that late day rally yesterday after volatility, and we recovered during the last half of the session yesterday. We gapped lower today. We sold off. We had the news of the port workers strike, and then later during the session we had news of Iran attacking Israel. We bullish divergence form, attempted a recovery, and then about the time that the attack coming to a conclusion, and people after that were they can come out of bomb shelters there in Israel. Again, we saw this recovery back up to the 200 period on the 5-minute chart here, and then a late last-minute sell-off again. Likely concerns that tensions could escalate overnight. So again, below the 200. I'll be watching to see if we get back above the 200 period tomorrow, or if we go back and try to take out this low in the 5-minute time frame. Clarify something. I said momentum shifted. It shifted in the 4-hour time frame on the 60-minute chart. It shifted down. It tried to do that in the daily time frame. We didn't close at the lows. Unsuccessful in shifting. The momentum line is still blue at this point. The bars are still green. So momentum's still hanging in there. We tried to get a reversal of conditions on the S&P, on the NASDAQ, on the Dow, and it was unsuccessful. S&P daily here. Same thing here on the NASDAQ. We tried to turn, and it still may. Momentum tried to turn down. The lows of the session, we didn't close there, and so it prevented it from happening with the momentum line anyways for right now. Momentum on the 4-hour time frame and the 60-minute charts, it's bearish at the moment. It's still form a divergence here in the daily time frame. This is the daily chart of the S&P 500. Again, try to push on an intraday low there below the cloud to flip it back to red, flip the bar back to red. We didn't do it. We closed just under the 10-period moving average here. That's the red line you see right there. Continue to have the red bars. My guess is we're going to end up seeing green bars. Now, maybe we go red. Maybe we end up getting a bigger sell-off, a bigger pullback, but then still try to go high. Again, my guess is NASDAQ's still going to fill that gap. It's going to do it very soon. I think it'll do it this week or next week. Do it before the weekends here. Like I said, if all my signals begin to start turning bearish, the momentum signals flip, and then we start seeing the trend signals all start turning bearish, maybe that's all she wrote. My guess, though, NASDAQ is still going to fill that gap, and S&P is still going to move closer to the upper channel line in upping process. I could be wrong about that if my signals start turning, if the markets get rattled, but I have the guts to tell you what I think. MACD is still not rolled over. Stochastic is. It's still above 80. But again, we still may see a bigger pullback and still end up forming a divergence before all is said and done on things like the RSI and the awesome oscillator here. So again, right now we dodged in the momentum in the daily time frame for right now. Key daily chart here, we were down 53, almost 54 points, down 0.93. We were down 1.5% at the lows. NASDAQ recovered off of the lows. It was down about 2% there at the lows, and it recovered again, preventing from getting a bearish reversal of conditions with momentum here. We did get a red bar, though. We did close below the 10-period moving average. Could be problematic. First red bar on the awesome oscillator yesterday. We get another one today. Stochastic's now breaking 80. So again, I'll be watching. Do we get a bigger pullback and then try to go up and fill that gap? We do it immediately. Is that it? Is the selling done and we try to do it? Or not fill that gap. I could be wrong about that. I'm telling you what I think. It doesn't have to fill. I think it will. And I think it will end up forming a divergence, and maybe on things like the awesome oscillator here or on the RSI in the daily time frame. Here is the 4-hour chart of the S&P. Again, we did see momentum flip here on the intraday chart, but not. I tried to flip in the daily time frame, was unsuccessful so far. S&P finding support at the momentum line and the upper end of the momentum cloud here. Again, if it goes deeper or tries to come back and fill the gap right here again, then we could either start a reversal, or you could set up again a divergence. You could end up setting up a divergence with a deeper pullback and then still going higher and then turning. See that happen here within the next 2 weeks. And again, talked about that. I've talked about that timeline. Again, it's a rule of thumb. As a rule of thumb, we've seen in the two market tops. This one topped before we ever got the rate cut. We've seen after the rate cut rallies last for about 3.5, almost 4 weeks. And then here, the selling resumed. We had already peaked and dropped 19.5%. We rebounded. By the time we got the first rate cut, we rallied for 19 sessions, almost 4 weeks. Then the crash resumed. Looking at the last two times, first rate cut with the last two, the bull markets and starting of the bear markets, this one had already begun by the time we got the rate cut, as I've talked about at great length and detail. So it's give or take. I'm not saying in 3.5 weeks, October 11th at 11:05 a.m., it's going to peak and turn. A rule of thumb. So I want you to understand why I keep talking about this. You know that there are negative divergences on the monthly and the weekly charts. Similar situation to what happened in 2007, where we had the first cut. It was the exact same day, September 18th. We rallied here for 17 sessions. We topped out. We moved to a new high for about 2 weeks, at about a 3.5 week rally. Then we dropped about 20.5% real fast and began to usher in the bear market. Had the final exit point, and that was it. The death cross, and we dropped a whole lot further. And I've cut off the right of the chart, but we ended up dropping 58%. Again, I'm just telling you, in the past, in the bull markets and starting the bear markets, this is what has happened. We've rallied in 4 weeks. You got a pretty good shot that's probably going to be the case this time. I told you we would get a post-Fed pivot rally. That's happened. I want to continue to monitor these weekly charts. Again, I think NASDAQ will end up setting up a lower high around 20,400. I think we'll move above that, not move to a new high, not above the peak over here at 20,690. I go to 20,500. I get closer to 20,600, but I think we're going to fill that gap, overthrow it, and then I think we're going to turn but not exceed 20,690. I could be wrong on that. I have the guts to tell you exactly what I think. Very few people do. Go higher. We can slam up into the trend line and overthrow it on the weekly chart. Been talking about. We are getting a green bar here. These divergences. It's really hard to find an indicator that doesn't have a divergence on it with the S&P 500. Just like at the NASDAQ top, the divergences were everywhere. In July, we have that everywhere. We have triple negative divergences everywhere on the S&P 500. I think you're going to see a red bar going forward. Will peak either this week or next week in all likelihood. Maybe a little bit later, maybe a little bit sooner here. Be starting now if we start seeing evidence of that. This is what we're still going to see the NASDAQ fill the gap. We're still going to see the S&P reach the upper channel line in all likelihood. But again, you can see the divergences here. You got it on the MACD, triple negative divergences everywhere. Everybody's telling us, October is just going to be a great month. And again, you've got the port worker strike. You've got tensions in the Middle East. You now have an election just over a month away. Again, there tends to be uncertainty surrounding the elections. I think you're going to see an October sell-off here. Starting now, maybe we buy a little bit more time, but I think it is coming. S&P weekly chart here. Momentum has turned bearish on the 60-minute chart. Momentum has turned bearish on the 4-hour chart. We've lost the 50 period here. We lost the momentum cloud here on the 60-minute chart. We're trying to find support at the trending cloud right here. Let's try to turn up with momentum yesterday. Then it rolled right back over today. And again, the two issues that I talked about, rattling the market a bit. Surprising, we didn't get a much bigger sell-off than we did. And I still think that there's a possibility NASDAQ fills that gap and S&P still may go higher. The selling may not be done yet. Again, we broke the 50. We back tested it. There's still risk of a bigger sell-off before a rebound. And again, I may be wrong about the rebound. It could be that we're getting a top right here. We start seeing more and more signals turn bearish, allowing those weekly signals to begin to play out. Now, again, this is a divergence that's going to form on the awesome oscillators, on the RSIs in the daily time frame. May go lower before we get a rebound higher. So do keep that in mind. We are seeing some weakness here on these intraday charts. We tried to flip the daily momentum, did it on an intraday basis, but then we recovered by the end of the session. So we'll see what happens. I think we got private payrolls tomorrow. We got the jobs report later in the week. That give us a bigger sell-off, or do we relief rally surrounding the jobs data? Saw that RSI form a negative divergence on the 60-minute chart that has now given us a pullback to this support area. Our previous peak over here from July, we had gapped down. We filled that gap. The day after the Fed pivot, we got above this area. We pulled back to it. We rallied higher. We formed this divergence. And now here we're resting at this area along with the cloud. So we'll see what happens. Again, below that, gap filled down here. We've got our 200 period moving average. So just some areas to be watching. We end up getting a bigger sell-off. But the divergence that did form has given us a sell-off. Will it lead to a reversal or a pullback that will end up setting up a larger divergence there in the daily time frame? Similar situation down here. Again, these divergences that have formed on the MACD have given us this pullback. If we can see the MACD firm up, then again, it buys us more time. Or if we go deeper into negative territory with the MACD, then again, that 200 period comes into play. The gap fill over here on the S&P 500 60-minute chart. We end up getting the start of a reversal here, or are we just pulling back to set up maybe a divergence there on those daily charts? Now, again, we have a possible rising wedge in place here. I've just connected this peak over here with this peak. We may end up overthrowing this level, by the way. It may not be that we do it, but if we end up selling off further, coming back to the 20 period, you could hit this trend line. I've excluded the shadow right here. And again, you still may end up getting something that looks like this and forming a divergence. It may be the RSI ends up going a little bit lower. Should we go towards the 20 period and the trend line, towards the cloud here, the momentum cloud here on the daily chart, and closer to that 200 period there, 60-minute chart. If we end up getting a bigger sell-off, this very well could be the scenario where we see a divergence happen here on the RSI, similar to the divergence over here, similar to the divergence over here. This one was more at extremes. This one is not. And again, a larger divergence. That's creating a larger divergence, by the way, of some indicators in the weekly time frame. The MACD with the sell-off so far has not rolled over. Again, it will be interesting. Does it roll over and we turn back up, or does it not roll over? And again, maybe we don't go down this far. I'm just showing you that this is an area of support if we do continue to drop. VIX was up over 10% today, so it is predicting in the next 2 days the S&P will have an update. It may go lower before that update. It may go closer to the 20 period before that update happens. It's predicting that either Wednesday or Thursday we will have an update on the S&P 500. Now, that doesn't mean that we can't go lower, and it doesn't mean, oh, in the next 2 days it'll end and we can rally. We may be topping here. My guess is that we're not. I think that NASDAQ's still going to fill that gap. There's some things. If the selling's done here, again, maybe we end up going higher right here, right now. But maybe this RSI drops towards the 50 level first, and we get a bigger sell-off, and then we get the rebound back up. And if so, then this trend line would come into play for a really nice-looking rising wedge going into forming a divergence on the RSI. So I'll be watching the histogram. Does it form a divergence? Does the MACD roll over? Does it form a divergence? Do we consolidate sideways, kind of like over here, and then form a larger divergence, something like that maybe? We kind of didn't really get a big pullback to the 20 period, but after the divergence completed, then we got it and dropped through it. Play out a couple different ways, but right now we're dropping and losing the 10 period moving average. I'll be watching to see if a divergence tries to develop on the RSI in the daily time frame, along with the possibility of a divergence developing on the some oscillator in the daily time frame, which I'm talking about in this video. Now, not only am I talking about a divergence on the RSI in the most recent price action, which is very possible, I'm talking about this larger divergence with the peak back over here from July. Again, very similar to the topping process here in 2020. Again, we formed a divergence, we sold off, we got a lower high, then pulled back, and then we went higher than that lower high that set up, and then we formed this divergence. Exact same thing going on here. This bigger sell-off ahead of it, just like we did over here. I mean, it looks really nearly identical. This one's a little bit more spaced out, took a little bit longer. Very, very similar. Look at this. A rising wedge pattern. Again, that's what's trying to form right here in the more recent price action. So just something to be paying attention to. A possible divergence if this is not done yet. Close up in the more recent price action that I showed you. And this larger divergence here in play back over here from the July high on the S&P 500. Again, I told you momentum was at extremes here. The S&P 500, we're already seeing it roll over on NASDAQ. So again, we still may get a bigger pullback. We still may form a divergence, or it just may stay up at extremes for an extended period of time. We can roll over and still kind of go more sideways as well, similar to what we did over here when we rolled over. So again, it can play out a number of different ways, but watching the upper boundary on the channel on the S&P weekly chart, I'm watching monthly trend lines. Again, my target level between 5750, we've already hit that level. That's the low end of the target, as high as 6,000. Not reached that level, but that is the window. So I'm watching that. Get a bigger sell-off momentum, might roll over here immediately. I want to continue to point out, I think these divergences are about to complete. Now, my guess is we're going to go up and hit this boundary. Again, we don't have to. I could be wrong about that, but I tell you what I think. How do I think that? Because I think NASDAQ's probably going to fill the gap still. It'll probably do it this week or next week, but I'll be watching to see how we close. Do we close strong? Do we close weak? But these divergences, these triple divergences are going to play out very soon. We start a reversal right here now or go a little higher, as I think. And then start to reverse. It doesn't matter. These divergences are going to play out very soon. And people are going to get a very rude awakening. October, September, October usually tend to be months with a lot of volatility. I told you I didn't think it was going to happen in September. I thought it would be mid-October, but I told you it could come as soon as late September. That was a possibility. And I tell you exactly what I think. Early to mid-October is what I think, which is, again, this week or next week. You're going to see these divergences play out. And people are in total complacency because I told you, again, I've been looking for new highs. We now have it. Our third week at new highs for the S&P 500 of the previous peak. When I'm saying new highs, I meant above the previous peak there in July. I was looking for a rally. We have it. Is it done? Maybe. My guess is it's not. But I think it's going to conclude very soon, and you're going to see this play out. Triple and quadruple negative divergences are the strongest reversal signals in technical analysis. Got triple divergences on a lot of indicators. See what happens. Do we close strong? Do we close weak? Does a reversal start immediately, or do we buy a little bit more time here? These divergences are warning, hey, something big is about to happen. But you got these triple divergences everywhere. Here it is. On S&P, we really had two equal peaks over here, really, again, forming this triple divergence. But just in the more recent price action right here, you have this divergence with the July peak right here. See the triple divergence on the MACD, again, with the peak over here, the peak here from July, and then now we're getting a lower high. So this thing is either wrapping up right now, or we're going to go a little bit higher. And again, you can include the shadow here with the upper channel line. You can include the shadow. You can exclude the shadow. I've excluded it here. Those are the levels I'm looking at. If we get a bigger rally, buys us a little more time. We start to turn. These signals are all going to begin to turn soon. I think you're going to see this start to play out here. Because I think we top over the next 2 weeks. I think either this week or next week. I think you got a good shot at it. Again, based on the rule of thumb. Looking at probability. We're looking at mathematically based indicators. These indicators are mathematically based. Trying to do fake fortune telling here. Again, I told you when the NASDAQ peaked, I thought it had topped. I told you the Dow has a shot at it, but again, I told you I'm not as certain because we still may form a divergence with the S&P 500 should we try to go higher. We got the topping tail, did not get confirmed. Yesterday we got either a bottoming tail or a hanging man, and then today we did confirm the topping tail, closing below it. Now you need to follow through and take out the 10 period and start coming back down and taking out the trend line here and seeing evidence of that. If we go a little bit lower and then bounce, you can still get what I'm looking at on the S&P. There's still this area here on that long-term monthly chart that's still in play. So again, we still may go a little higher, but again, I am looking for a possible top of the Dow. The Dow, as I keep saying, may top before the S&P and the nasdaq. This again, divergence going on here. The MACD, again, like the S&P, has not yet rolled over, so there's still a possibility we go to the upper end of this trend line still. So watching that, again, the candlestick is meaningless unless you get confirmation and a follow through. Dow tried to flip the momentum today with a reversal of conditions that couldn't do it. Neither could the S&P or NASDAQ, at least so far in the daily time frame. Again, we had this channel on the Dow. The Dow overthrew the upper boundary, very similar to what NASDAQ did when it topped back in July. But look at the divergence here. You've got those multiple point divergence going on, going back over to here with this first peak that developed right here. Then multiple point divergences where we keep going higher, but we keep getting a series of lower highs on the RSI. You got this divergence going on down here on the MACD. This is all going to play out very soon. But because it doesn't play out immediately, because we're in a topping process, people then come to the wrong conclusion that it's not going to play out. So again, multiple point divergence is likely going to lead to a reversal rather than a pullback. Dow weekly chart. Now, again, the S&P is at extremes. Momentum. We're starting to roll over now with NASDAQ right here. Again, I've talked about at great length and detail, this is what I think is going on. I think we've got an ABC structure. I don't think it's done yet. I think we're going to fill this gap, maybe overthrow it a little bit, and then I think we'll see a peak. Now, I could be wrong about that. Again, we don't have to fill the gap with the black candlestick. We did hit the low end of that candlestick for the gap there. I have to fill it. My guess is we're going to, and I think we'll end up setting up a lower high for a double top. I've talked about this at great length and detail. Then I think you're going to see a real big sell-off going into the election. October is going to have a lot of volatility in it, but I think that, again, you got a good shot at maybe peaking here early October. Said if we get a bigger sell-off, you might form a larger divergence right here or just start going sideways. But again, this is what I think is going to happen. Again, I'm looking for a lower high. Told you if I'm wrong about that, we go up to that upper channel line and probably overthrow it on the weekly chart, start to reverse right here and now. Then maybe I'm wrong about the gap fill. I've talked about that. But again, I tell you exactly what I think. Now again, momentum, we lost the 50-period moving average here. The MACD is in negative territory, so there's still risk of going lower to the 200, back to the gap fill here, whatever. We're at gap support right here. We had gap support, and then we just, that was a low there, just below gap support. And that's really where we're at right now. But again, if we bounce here, go a little bit lower and bounce, this is where I think we're headed to fill the gap, and then I think you're going to turn. But I think we could see that take place over the next 2 weeks here, week or next week. I think it's very possible. We continue to sell off. Again, maybe the RSI has to go deeper into extremes here. Like I said, I still think we're going to go back and fill the gap up here. Signals all start turning bearish. Daily time frame, we start seeing trend signals all begin to turn to bearish. Then I could be wrong about that gap filling, and we could turn sooner than later. As I've been warning, it's still a possibility. Again, I think we could still get a bigger rally. I could be wrong about that if we start seeing my signals turn bearish. NASDAQ peak back over here, as I've said. Then I think we're going to come back down. Once we top out, I think we're going to come back down, break the blue trend line here, break horizontal support here, and I think we're going to start moving back towards this trend line, back towards the October 23 low. We'll do that over time. Eventually, I think NASDAQ will come back and take out the pandemic low here in 2020, and then I think it will bottom out. That's where I think we're going with the bear market.